Hello and welcome to another edition of Another Book Review. This week I'll be reviewing Jenni Fagan's debut novel, The Panopticon. Talk a little bit about the author. I'll give a brief spoiler-free overview of the plot, talk about what I liked about the book, what I didn't like about the book, and I'll finish off with who I would recommend the book to, and then talk about what I'll be reading for next time. So, Jenni Fagan is a Scottish novelist. This is her first novel. She has had the novel adapted into a stage play, and it will soon be adapted into a movie with her writing the script. She is relatively young. I believe this came out in 2012 when she was 35. So she's a fairly promising up-and-coming author. She's also had other novels published after this one, as well as collections of poems. This is the first novel of hers that I've read. So that is Jenni Fagan. This book, The Panopticon, is about a 15-year-old girl whose name I believe is pronounced Anise. She is placed into a foster care unit after she is accused of battering a police officer nearly to death. The title of the novel comes from the idea of the Panopticon, which I don't know if Foucault invented the term or if he popularized it, but it is in a prison system. There is a watchtower in the middle of the prison. The prison surrounds the watchtower. The top of the watchtower, it's lit up to the point where the prisoners can't tell whether or not someone is in the watchtower or not. The light is always on, so they just assume that there is always someone watching them. That ties into the main character, as she believes that she is constantly being watched, constantly being surveillanced. She refers to herself throughout the novel as an experiment. And there's always a question of her state of mental health as the novel kind of goes on. But the novel is really about her time in this facility and her interactions with the other juveniles in that system and their kind of relationships and bonds and things of that nature. So that's a brief, spoiler-free overview of it. There's a lot of twists and turns in the novel as far as her kind of comings and goings. So it's not just set in one single place the entire time. They do kind of get out of the facility a little bit. The book is entirely written in a Scottish dialect, so I did find myself having to Google certain words and phrases to understand what they meant. But I think that kind of lent the book to an aura of realism. Even though these characters are all juveniles, there's a lot of really heavy things they deal with. There's a lot of trauma in basically all the characters' lives who are in this facility. The main character she doesn't know who her birth parents are, but one of her main foster parents was murdered, and it kind of goes and kind of explains how that murder kind of set her off on a path to get her to the point where she, like I said before, is being accused of battering a police officer nearly to death. So that is really the novel in a nutshell. It's a relatively quick novel. I read this in a few days. The reading level itself is not really too difficult as long as you can kind of get past the dialect. I saw in the copy that I had, there's a primer to teach this into school systems. I guess my question would be at what level it's taught. When I picked up the book and I read kind of the inner flap, I thought it was going to be more something like The Hunger Games or Divergent or something else that was a young adult novel. This is really not a young adult novel. The themes and the difficulties that the characters go through, there's a lot of really heavy subject matter. There is child prostitution. There is abuse, both mental and physical abuse. There is drug use, alcohol abuse. There's a suicide. There is murder, as I mentioned before. There is a situation where there are rape, sexual assaults. There's just a lot of really heavy things, especially given the age of the characters involved. So I think that may turn some people off. What didn't I like about the novel? The only thing that I didn't really care for in the novel, there are places where there's not a lot of action going on. There are definitely places where it's more of the character's internal monologue. So there were some points in the novel where it kind of dragged because of that. I thought the novel does a good job of, again, kind of showing how the trauma and abuse causes these characters to have coping mechanisms that a lot of people who have not gone through that experience wouldn't necessarily have. I thought that was, again, really true to life. I felt like one of the negative things about it was that there are some characters who are less utilized than others. Most of the characters are fairly nuanced, and most of the stories make sense. There's one or two characters who I felt that was less the case, and there are maybe a couple of plot threads that are left unresolved at the end of the novel. But overall, it's a hard book to say you enjoy, because it's a fairly grim tone throughout the novel. There are parts of levity in the book, but they're fairly few and far between. But if you are interested in kind of the blurb that's on the back of this is from the author of Trainspotting. I've never read the book Trainspotting, but I have seen clips of the movie. It definitely has that kind of feel as far as the underground, due to the drug and alcohol abuse and the age of the characters. I definitely kind of felt they were kind of kindred spirits in that sense. I think Trainspotting, the character's a little bit older, but it definitely has that kind of like, there's like the normal 9-to-5 world, and then there's the world that these kids are in, and it's completely different. And so I thought that was handled well and handled realistically. So that's my opinion on the Panopticon. I would recommend it to people who are maybe college students. I think it's maybe a little bit heavy for high school students, but I think that's really kind of at your discretion. If there's a high schooler who comes to you and wants to read it, I would knock it out, read it in a few days, and then make your own judgment of whether or not you think it's something that they would be able to handle or not handle. So that's the Panopticon. And then next time I will be reading a book called Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero. Until next time, please feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll have my link to my Twitter feed below in the comments. Until next time, bye.